and then this is a lot of leaning on SQL skills, right? Okay, so working with null values, what we have the CRM database. I think it's actually like pretty related to the data you're working with in DBT. You can see we have like the first name, last name. I'm loading this just from a CSV, and then we'll save it to SQL, pass through the connection. It's breaking, probably because, you see this error? This is the table already exists. If you get this error, you can, there's different ways. One, this means that you already have the person's table in the database. So you're good, actually. But if you want to kind of like reload it, you can, this toSQL takes this argument, if exists equals, and then you can type in replace, right, to like replace the data. I think I'm good. I'm not gonna do that. And now let's just do like a select statement. Let's do select the limit 5. Okay, here we go. So you can start to see, right, we have, let's do limit 10. I want to start to see some other data. Here we go. All right. So you can see that we're missing some first names here, right? The none value that you see in pandas, this is really, in SQL land, this is null. Okay, so these are null values in our database, both with first name, with these various first name values. So there are different ways that you can kind of handle this. Basically, SQL has almost like a default value, in their select statement. So what we can do is we can use this coalesce function. So I'll just select first name, comma, last name to start. And then we still see our null values. And now what we'll do is we'll use coalesce. And that will take the column. And then I'll do comma. And I just put the string like unknown. Okay? So you can see, and I'll say, sorry, as first name. Just give the column an alias. All right. So now everywhere that it was null, right, it's replaced with unknown. Okay? You can see that. Let's just show it side by side. Yeah. So you see this was none. These are all none. And now every place where it's none, we just replace it with unknown. So if you quickly want to like coerce, right, your null values, you can use the coalesce statement. And basically, right, so whenever it's null, replace with unknown. The other thing you can do is you can also specify like when there's no first name, you go to this other column. All right, so the way that you'll do that is you'll literally just put the column name. So it's like maybe when there's no first name, go to this person's last name. So you see that? So here there was no first name, so we did this, went to the last name. Here there was no first name, so we used their last name, etc., etc. Okay? So that's the coalesce. This is actually probably more useful, that second thing, if you want to do like the phone numbers, right? Like maybe if they don't have the phone number, a cell phone number, use their home phone number, something like that, right? So that's one way, right? When it's null, go to this other value. Another thing you may want to do is go from, like some value to null. So let's give you an example of that. Let's see right here. I don't have, this isn't a very good example. Let's see, I must have first name, last name, limit 10. Let's do select star. I may have to go to the reading to take a look. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. Yeah, I just want to, again, what we're trying to do is go from, like what I'll do is we'll find like data that's maybe an empty string, but really what we want to do is like treat it as null. So let me just show you an example as this. Is this, it looks, here I guess, it is showing up. You see it's not none here. This would be an example. Let me just make sure I load this. Apologies. Run this, run this, run this. Read SQL. This is looking good. This is looking good. Oh yeah, it's back to none. That's not what I wanted. Yeah, it's back to none. Yeah, essentially, if you with this, let me just show you what the code is doing. Sorry, the data is not really in the best format. Say these were empty strings, and we wanted to count them as null. What we could do is basically say, like, when we get an empty string, convert this to null, right? And that's what this null if is. So the first column this is like the column that we want to apply this to, and this is the value that we're looking for. So again, it's like, we want this to be null, treat this as null, if the first name is an empty string, right? Just to give like a silly example, let me see, let's try first name. Yeah, so we can do like a silly example and like, null if the first name is Enos, right? Then this should be, see that now this is null, okay? So this is very useful because, right, like the empty string probably is, we should just treat that as a null value. So this is like an easy way to clean this up. When would we want to keep null over unknown? Yeah, so I actually would prefer, depends on the use case. Like maybe you want, I think for like data purposes, like data analysis purposes, it's useful to have your data as null. So let me maybe explain why. Remember, we can like count up. Let's say we have, let's do select star from persons. So we have all these values. We know that some of them, I believe, should be null, right? So one thing to remember is you can do something like count star, right? And what would that do? That will give you back the total number of rows in the data set. Let's not do limit 10. So count star, right? There's 1,000 rows in the data set. Now, if you do count star and also do like count, comma, the first name, this is probably going to be less than 1,000. Why? Because count only is going to, for when you apply count to a column, it only includes the non-null values. Okay? So this is the number of non-null values. So we have 290, or well, I can't subtract, 298 null values. So so another thing maybe you want to do is like convert. You could maybe first convert like those strings to be nulls, and use a CTE, and then from there count the null values then, right? And include the empty strings essentially in your count. Okay, like treat them as null values. So, for me, I think just for like analytical purposes, if they're the same thing, you want to treat them as the same thing, right? At the same time, so you want to treat them as null values. At the same time, maybe it's the case that empty strings illustrate some sort of behavior, or, like that, like there's some sort of clue in the fact that this is an empty string and not a null. So that's why you would always save your original source data and be able to go back there. Do we differentiate between null? Okay, null and none. No, when you see, there is no difference between null and none. So basically, all that's happening here is when you do like the select star from persons, these nuns are null. The only reason why you see none is because this is a pandas data frame, and in pandas the equivalent of null is none. Okay, that's what's going on here. But these are null values. All right. So what were the kind of the two things, right? We saw that we can do coalesce, right? Where if something is null, then we'll replace it with a value like unknown if you want to. And that might be like at a last stage, like if you want to present this to, like some external stakeholder, like a business person or something like that. Maybe you want to format that and not just show them null values, but show them something like unknown. It's more readable. And then the null if is probably more like at the data analysis stage, where it's like, we want to treat these values as null, right? These missing strings just as the same as our null data. Other things you can do is, here you can see that we are, right, this is like that example of what if I want to change all my null values to unknown, and I also want to change my empty strings to be unknown, right? Because this is effectively the same thing. So what we can do is first convert everything that's an empty string, right, in the first name column to be null, right? So take all the empty strings, make them null, and now apply coalesce to the first name column. So basically what occurs is, we have our data, it says first name, and we have like an empty string here, and then we have a none here, and then we have like actually someone's name. What this will do is, in the first stage, when we apply, I'll do it down here. If we apply the null if, right, what it's going to do is change this to be none. So that's the first thing that's happening, is we're changing this empty string to be none. Okay, or it was originally an empty string. Then in the second stage, we're doing coalesce. And so now coalesce looks at this none value and this none value and replaces them, treats them both the same, and turns them to be unknown. Okay, so this is like a nice trick, because we can again first say, hey, just treat this just like it's null, and now that this is null, right, apply the coalesce function, and that will apply to the whole column. So it will take these transform values, and where they're null, turn them to whatever string you want, here unknown. Okay, so just to see that again, here's the column. It has both like some data that we want to treat as null and the actual null values. Applying null if first translates them all to null, and then applying coalesce will take the null values and replace it with whatever we kind of specify here. All right. So it's just a nice trick. It can come in handy a little bit in some LeetCode problems. I think the main thing also to remember, probably the most important thing to keep note of, is just the fact that, remember, our null values are not, when we apply the count, all we're counting is the non-null values, okay? When we apply count to a column. When you do count star, that's going to count the number of rows. Okay, next thing, just to briefly, to go through is, I guess, just case when. Just talk about this for a little bit. Same thing, we can load up our data. This is our Yelp data. Okay. So, if you select from here and then you look at this category, right, you can see that this has like parentheses, American traditional. You can imagine that we want to just count this as like American, we don't, maybe there's not like 10 records that have American traditional, and we're about to do some data analysis. We want to see how many different, types of American restaurants there are, just like any other kind of restaurant. And so what we want to do is like change all these types of American traditional, just count it as American. So what you might do is select, so we can do select name, comma, category, just for now. It's fine to do limit 5. And then we'll do this. We'll do case. It's always hard for me to like remember the syntax. So I always just type in case when then end. All right, and I'll do as category. So it's case when category equals American traditional. Okay, then just call it American. Okay, now if you do this and then as category column, So you're going to see something weird. This is going to feel weird for a second. Okay, so this is what's happening. So now you see all of my categories are none, but this one did get cleaned up properly, right? So basically, maybe you can probably guess what's happening is that I forgot to put an else statement in here. So case when the category is American traditional, then American. That's this one. And then we can do else, just do the category. And now, right, that's working. So this is like a way that you can start cleaning up your data. If you have, let's say there's other things we want to change, like for instance, I don't know, maybe deli would be like convenience store or something like that. You can do case when, then American, and we can do when, delis, then convenience store. So you can see, right, we can just apply more and more, essentially like if-else statements here. And this did not work. Oh, case when category, sorry, category equals delis, then convenience store. I broke it. Then American, when, did I not do that right?
Categories of sub.
Category, thank you. Yeah. All right, so now this changed, right, to convenience store. So this is just, right, like we're in the staging phase of DBT. So what part of what we're gonna have to do is just like clean up our data. So this is just a way to show that one use case for case when is just a way to like clean up our data, all right? Another thing we can do, is use them in aggregates. So for example, you can just see the results here is that I can do like, let's do it this way first. Let's do the city, case when category equals Chinese, then end. Let's not do a group by from restaurants. Order by that, that's fine. And let's just do limit. Okay. So basically what we're doing, let's do city, let's do, I think name. It's not name. What's the name of the restaurant? It's name. Oh, capital N. Okay, so when name, comma city. So you can see basically what this is doing, and let's put in category as well. Probably with a capital C. Select comma, yeah. Okay, so you can see that basically when this is not Chinese, right, then it's just putting the none, as we all kind of know. Now, you can combine this with the count function, right? That way, if we want to say like count up the number of Chinese restaurants, you can just wrap this in count. And now, remember, whenever this is not null, it's going to count it, right? The other thing that's going to happen, of course, is we're only going to get one row because there's no group by here, and count is an aggregate function. So we should probably remove these, and we'll just do count as number of Chinese restaurants. Okay? And it breaks. And oh, I put it twice somehow. Oh, it's right here. Count. Case one. Sorry about that. Let's take this out. Okay, this worked. All right, so now we do select count. So we took the one, right? We're just counting the present values. So we started with all those null values and then some one when the category actually is Chinese, and that gives us number of Chinese restaurants. And you can basically do the same thing for now. Let's do number of Italian restaurants. You just do case when category equals Italian, then one end as number of Italian, and I'm breaking it again, comma. Okay, so here's the number of Italian restaurants. Why is this, we could have just done, you could think that, hey, let's just maybe compare this with the group by for 1 second, right? Because we could have just done select, count of category, count star from restaurants, group by the category, right? That would be another way of doing this. And then as amount, order by amount descending, limit 10, and let's also put in the category here. Okay, this is another way of doing this. You can see we're getting the same result, but sometimes people prefer to have it kind of horizontally. That's really like, one of the main differences. The other thing that you can see is that we're also able to, show it kind of in this 2x2, right? Like here's the number of Chinese restaurants in Staten Island. And the way that we're doing that is simply, if we want to go back to the original query, right? The way that we're doing that is now that we've broken this out horizontally, right? You can also then do like group by, group this by the city, right? So take all those, group this by the city and then order by whatever you want, So now let's also put the city in here. Okay. So you can kind of think of this. It's a little tricky, right? But just remember that the way this starts off is that we have a bunch of like ones or null values for each of these. And then we group by the city. And then each one of the ones, right, when it's a Chinese restaurant, is going to be counted. And then each one of the ones, when it's Italian, is going to be counted. Okay? And then we go to the next grouping here. All right, so this is kind of nice, I guess, way to show like a two-dimensional, way to do this. Getting, knowing these, I don't think this comes up super often, right? It's good to go through to see these applications. This is the most popular one that you'll see is both cleaning up the data, right, which we showed here, and then also like not doing necessarily like a 2x2, but just doing a, in this case, count, when this is occurring, put a 1 there, and do it that way. So if you can understand this and write this out, that's pretty good. And then the other thing I wanted to show you is you can also calculate like what is the average. This is the average rating of just Chinese restaurants in this town, right, in New York. So it's like when the category is Chinese, then give us the rating. Otherwise, 0, and divide and add all of these up, right? So add up the total number of ratings. So if it's all 5 stars across 20 Chinese restaurants, right, we'll get 100. And then we'll divide by the number of Chinese restaurants, right, 20. And that would give us a 5, okay? So that's what you can imagine is happening here. So case when it's, Chinese restaurant, then give us the rating. Otherwise, don't count it, and divide that by the total number of Chinese restaurants. Okay? And again, what's the benefit of this? Well, it's kind of like the same thing, right? We can do this now. New York, what's the average for Chinese restaurants? And then also do the same thing for pizza or Italian or whatever. Okay? So these are, like for me, I would typically have to like maybe look this up. I think the most important thing is that you can read this and then, replicate it. All right. But we do have like readings and labs on this, on the case when stuff. All right. Cool. The last thing is just I have this, I posted the solution, but just to explain kind of the logic. If you remember, let's actually go to the lab. Yes, you can start to see, right? This is the way our data is kind of looking. Let's maybe go into here. All right, and select phone from stage from the suppliers. Phone from suppliers. Can I do that? Semicolon. Okay. All right. So you can see, right, some of this data is messed up here, right? Some of the data probably is just like invalid, meaning that it only has, like this only has 9 digits. So what's the approach for working with this? My approach for working with this was to first get rid of all the characters. So let me just show you what I'm doing here. So it's, instead of select phone from suppliers, we can paste this in. And now what would this do? This will, whenever we see this parentheses or this dash or the dot, right, replace it with just get rid of it. And then whenever so let's just see that. So now you can see that we're left with only the numerical values, whereas originally we had all this stuff in here. Okay, all the extra characters. So the first step that I did, at least, was get rid of, and what this is doing is for each one of the non-numerical values, replace it with an empty string. Okay, and there's just a comma in between each one of these non-numerical values. Okay, replace it with an empty string, and then I think I did the same thing, for a space. Then for the remaining spaces, replace that with an empty string as well. And what that does is it gets rid of all the spaces and all the non-numerical values. And then from there, we can just count up, right? And kind of validate our data and make sure that our data has 10 digits in it. And so the next step that I'm doing down here is when the length is 10, right? Reformat it. In other words, select the first 3 numbers, so that's a substring, get 1 through 3, and put back in the beginning and ending parentheses. Then get the second set of data, right, and put in a hyphen, and then get the third set of data. And you can see this double pipes is for concatenation, okay, in Postgres. Again, I would have to, I think I gave you hints as to how to Google this and look this up, but, this is some of the coercion work to do, but it's also just a way to learn a little bit more about these methods to clean up. Oh, you don't need commas for translate. That's nice. So the idea is let's take a look at that. Let's see, so maybe I can delete this and this, like any of these, and now it should, whenever it sees it, it should replace it with an empty string. Let's see. Yeah, that works beautifully. Very nice. Cool. I wonder, but if we leave out this one, I just want to demonstrate this, right? This is to get rid of the empty spaces. So if you started here, then we'll still have this issue with the empty space. So that's why we wrap this and replace. Yeah.
If you just add a space at the end of just put a space there, that works. It'll take out the spaces.
Very nice. There we go. Excellent. Cool. Yeah. So the way I did it was to have this extra method, but this is cleaner, I think, in my view, is use all of it, just any of the matching characters, including the space, replace it with an empty string. Very cool. So now we're down to just the numerical values, and then from there, right, so this is our first CTE effectively, that's the work that we're essentially doing. As phone number, this is renamed, and now select from that cleaned up table, and now place back in, right, the parentheses and the dashes, and just, select the first 3 characters, select the next set. This is, by the way, this is starting from index 1, right? Select 3 characters. Starting from index 4, select 3 characters. Starting from index 7, right? Select 4. Okay. And again, do I remember that? No. I would have to look that up and see that. Okay. Yeah, I think that so we'll go through this. I'll deploy the case when reading and lab. Probably it's best just to get practice. That's probably the best way to really understand this is just to get practice. And then if you finish that, you can learn. This is just a little bit of tooling. I don't think it's that tricky. Back to DBT in using something called sources. All right, in the ref function. It's just a little bit of cleanup to do. So we can, if you want, I'll publish this as well, and we'll see. We may not even need a lecture on this, but I'm happy to go through it if you need. This thing is optional. This was for the previous version of the curriculum, but if you just want to see how this works, I kept the reading in there. So I don't think you have to actually code anything here. You just have to look at the reading if you're curious. There's a question about doing a join.
I did a join where you have select all from final. I ended up doing a join in that. Is that kind of a no-no or?
What did you need to join? What table?
I did my phone kind of how you have here, separate. So I had renamed, and I got my phone in a different select statement and translated it all. So I had 2 tables that I then combined.
If you don't need to do it, I don't think, because this is just a single table query for right now, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I don't think you need to do a join, and it's just a little more complicated if you do. So I'd probably just keep it.
Okay.
Try to remove it. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah, go through this. Feel free, share your results with share